tomorrow because, Fridays belong to football here on KLIN. You know that by now. So we're going to talk a lot about the anniversary of the JFK assassination tomorrow on Drive Time Lincoln. So don't go anywhere. We got a preview coming up later in DTL today. But right now, so glad to have you in studio with us on Drive Time Lincoln, a candidate for U.S. Senate, Republican candidate, and a name that you know very well here in the capital city and all around Nebraska, Sid Dinsdale. Sid, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming in studio today.
Kevin, thank you so much. Nice to be here.
So you've been on the campaign for a couple months now. Is it what you expected?
It is what I expected, maybe times two, as far as the work commitment and the number of people I've met and the busyness of the schedule. But it's fun, but it's work, but it should be. It's the United States Senate I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, you got to shake a lot of hands.
That's
You got to
right.
talk to a lot of people. And one of the big stories that came out in the Senate race a couple months ago, you were still very new to the race at that point, so you didn't have to put out the campaign numbers. But the fundraising seems to have really picked up in a lot of the campaigns. How are the dollars flowing in for you?
Well, I think I'm doing real fine. I'm choosing to fund my campaign from Nebraska people, Nebraska companies, and I obviously don't have the East Coast, Washington, D.C., New York connections that maybe some of my competitors do, but more power to them. They're raising money there. I'm just raising money from Nebraskans.
I think when we had you on right after you announced, I asked the question, what separates you from the other candidates? There are a few other candidates in there, and now that we've got maybe a Democratic candidate, not quite sure, but we've got an independent candidate for sure. So the field is starting to really take shape. Right. As you know more and more people that are in the race, and as you travel around Nebraska, what part of your message do you think is resonating more with voters?
Well, I think the breadth and depth of my experience, almost 35 years in business, creating jobs. We have 800 or so people across Nebraska that work in our companies, 58 banking locations, and numerous ag companies. So everywhere I go, people know me or know somebody that knows me, so I don't have a lot of things I can hide, obviously. But my business experience, plus I believe in term limits, and I would serve up to 2 terms. And my wife and I have been very, very involved in charity and civic work in Omaha, but also across the state. We try to give a lot of our time as well as our money to good civic activities. I've served on numerous nonprofit boards, continue to, as does my wife. So those are probably a couple of the distinctions that I have. I'm an older man. I'm 61, so I've experienced a lot more of life, maybe.
I want to ask about the charity work you've done and maybe how that would play into the D.C. side of things, because we talk so often about the entitlement programs and the welfare state and things like that. But how do you cultivate that idea of charity work on the individual basis? Because I think, to me, that's where the best help comes from for so many people when you're not relying on government. So is there something as a U.S. Senator that you could do to encourage that and maybe try to turn things around from the entitlement side of government to getting some personal responsibility onto charitable type giving?
Well, the best charity work there is a job. And everywhere I go across Nebraska, there are all kinds of jobs available in the trades, and they're good jobs. You know, a welder, a plumber, electrician, jobs in manufacturing. I was in Holdridge a month or so ago, and they want to employ 70 people in this manufacturing job, in this manufacturer, but they only have 55 employees. So one way is to make sure that we are providing training for those good jobs in the trades, versus just emphasizing maybe college so much and a 4-year bachelor's degree, because there's good jobs, good benefits out there. So I would emphasize some kind of job training that really rewards people in the right way, gets them a job instead of just pure charity.
Sid Dinsdale is with us in studio today. He's asking for your vote in about 7 months in the primary election on the Republican side for U.S. Senate. Sid, you mentioned something that we've talked about on Drive Time Lincoln a lot of, I would say, probably the last 2 or 3 months. College education versus those training programs. When it comes to the cost of education, whether it is a vocational school or a traditional 4-year university or whatever it is there something you see that we can do maybe to curb the cost increases that we've been seeing, or is that something government should just stay out of?
Well, the government's in it already in a big way. So, but I think that competitive forces are going to change things, and it's happening before our eyes with online programs that heretofore have maybe been looked down upon a little bit. But I was involved with Bellevue University, still am an emeritus director of Bellevue University, and they provide great college education at a lower cost. A lot of it's online. They have no tenure. So I think forces are moving. I'm a University of Nebraska graduate, and I love the University of Nebraska. But as you were saying, Kevin, not everybody should go to college or needs to go to college, or they go to a different kind of college. There's all kinds of experiences you can have in life and in education, and we don't want to pigeonhole anybody. So to answer your question, I think competitive forces are going to make changes.
The business aspect that you bring to the race, I think, is one thing that you have pointed out and will continue to point out, your business experience. One thing that I think a lot of people are talking about right now, and it seems to be boiling up maybe more on the East Coast, I'd say, first, but this may end up being an issue in the U.S. Senate or in the House or all over D.C., but minimum wage. With your business background, if a minimum wage bill comes up while you're in the U.S. Senate, let's say it's to $10 or anything like that, how do you approach those, and how do you explain your position to the people who may not like what you're saying about minimum wage?
Right. Well, first of all, not everybody's going to agree with me on everything, so I would listen closely to my constituency. And I have probably a philosophical challenge with minimum wage because I hope market forces take care of that, and minimum wage is not really that big an issue. I think certainly in Nebraska, minimum wage doesn't really mean too much in most businesses I'm familiar with because you don't hire people at minimum wage. So I'm more inclined to let market forces work. But I do have an understanding that there are really jobs out there that don't pay enough, and I just hope that people have the opportunity with minimal government interference to better themselves and get a better job. I'm all about more Nebraska and less Washington, D.C. in all respects. I think we've lost track of what makes this country great. Like, Kevin, you didn't take a test somewhere to become a radio personality. You figured it out, and you worked hard and took some risks to get here. And that's what America's all about. It's when government puts these obstacles in front of us. The EPA for businesses, for example, is really overstepping their bounds. The next thing I'm really concerned about is education with Common Core. Even with good intent, I think those things end up in a bad place. I mean, in Nebraska, we have great schools, and we kind of know what we're doing here. So just leave us alone and let us take care of our own affairs would be my response.
I would say that thought probably applies to things like Medicaid expansion too,
and
Obamacare as a whole. I mean, look at that mess. Everybody sees it's a big mess. So, and I asked this question of Congressman Fortenberry: do you stand back and watch it crumble and then just pick up the pieces afterwards, or do you get in there and try to help fix it? What would you do if you're in D.C. right now?
Well, that is the question. I think probably looking back, it might have been a mistake to delay what was happening and just should have let it happen. Well, it's happening now, and the Republicans, of which I am one, we've got to come up with answers, and it's yet to be determined whether we try to sharpen this up so it makes more sense or just let it fail. I am not a big believer in a single-payer system across the country. I don't like more government control, and I don't know why the government or insurance companies involved when I go to the doctor for a cold. I don't know why they're I should say they only should be involved in catastrophic circumstances like a transplant or cancer treatment. And then there should be charity care. But again, the government taking over 17% of our economy makes no sense to me. I'm for less of that stuff. But we got to have an alternative to Obamacare. And it is a disaster everywhere we go. I've been traveling around today like I do most days. And I mean, there's story after story here. So it's up to the American people. We got to rise up. We got to say enough is enough of this stuff. It's craziness.
What's the alternative then? You say we've got to have one. What is
Well, we do have to have an alternative that relies more on addressing the problem of health care, which is cost. And the way you address cost, to me, is you have alternatives. An example might be LASIK surgery. Several years ago, it was $2,500. Now I think it's in the $1,000 range, and I'm on the radio and I'm quoting numbers, and I'm not exactly sure those are precise numbers, but the idea is that procedures and costs do come down when Americans have a choice.
Sid, I really appreciate you coming in studio. We'll talk many more times before the primary election, I'm sure. But it's great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Well, thanks for not asking me about the football team. I appreciate that.
Well, I mean, we could talk. Actually, you know what? Hang on. I do want to say this isn't about the football team, but I would like to point this out because here at KLIN we have been big supporters of Team Jack, and I know you know where I'm going now.
Yeah.
And I hope that people know this, but it was announced Team Jack and Andy Hoffman at the big event in September up in Atkinson, or did the radiothon and everything, that you and Pinnacle Bank were the big $100,000 donor to uplifting athletes. And I just want to make sure people know that. Why'd you get involved with Team Jack like that?
Well, I tried to talk about that night, Kevin. I got all choked up, because I've got young children too. But Andy Hoffman just wrote me the darndest letter I've ever gotten, and it just really struck me about Jack. And so, thanks for bringing it up. We didn't do it for publicity, but it was nice of you to offer anyway.
Well,
so.
it's a great thing. I think it's great for not just Team Jack, but kids all over the country, hopefully, are getting help from the money raised by Team Jack and uplifting athletes. Sid, it's been great talking to you. We'll talk again soon.
All right, Kevin, thanks a lot.
That's Sid Dinsdale, candidate for U.S. Senate on the Republican side here in the state of Nebraska. Plenty of time to talk again. We'll have many more issues, I'm sure, come up here before May for the primary election. It's 4:58 and 59 in Lincoln.